doing adaptations and comics and movies and video games. I'm really excited to talk to you guys. Hey guys, thanks for being here. How you doing?
Great, thank you.
Good, good. I wanted to start off and ask you guys about your first introduction to comic books. Do you guys remember the first comic book you purchased? Uh-oh.
Hello? Yeah, I still got the first comic book I purchased.
You still have the very first
I still got
one?
all the first comic books I purchased.
Which comic was it?
There's an issue of World's Finest. I can't remember exactly which issue it was, but it had a Neil Adams cover where Batman had been turned into a giant bat and was beating the crap out of Superman.
Nice.
And I've still got it, like the cover fell off years ago and it's in pieces because I read it so much.
That's amazing. Was it the cover that initially drew your attention?
Yeah, I guess so. It also, it was the World's Finest where it was like 100 pages, so it would have stories about tons of different characters. So for me, I didn't really know all those characters. I knew the Super Friends. It's kind of what I knew, so I liked it. Oh, like who's this Green Arrow guy? And you get 10 pages of him and 10 pages of Hawkman or whoever. So it was a good intro into like there's this whole universe of characters.
Christian?
Mine was Shazam. I don't still have it. That's incredibly impressive. It's so impressive. Yeah, I was Shazam. Shazam was fighting off. He went underground and he was fighting these rat people. And there was a rat king, and it was super cool. We bought it in a grocery store because you could buy them in grocery stores back then. It was really fun.
Like off the spinner rack.
Was yours also at the grocery store?
Probably, or the drugstore. I'd tag along with my mom, and wherever there was a spinner rack, she's shopping, I'm off flipping through the comics. And now, like I tweeted on Mother's Day the other day, I've got a spinner rack in my office, like next to my desk, that's covered with all those books those ragtag, thoroughly read books that I bought off the spinner rack, and my mom bought me off the spinner rack back in the day. Like these are sitting, right next to me as I'm looking.
That's really cool. I grew up in the middle of nowhere. Our grocery store did not have comic books, and our local bookstore was run by very fabulous lesbians who did not believe in comic books. They were like, this is not real literature. So I didn't get into comics until college when a friend took me to comic book day, and I was like, Batman exists on page? Like, what is happening? And she was like, yeah, like you can get all things. And I loved it. I became instantly obsessed. You guys, we're here today to talk about adaptation. Were you guys doing fan fiction, or were you writing your own stories with either Batman or other characters before you became like professional writers?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I made my own comics. Like I loved to draw when I was kind of before I got into writing. I really loved to draw. And at some point, I kind of transitioned. So I still draw like a pretty good fourth grader. That's where my drawing ability is. It's probably worse at this point. I think I've regressed. I could draw better when I was in fourth grade. But I would make my own comics. Me and my best friend kind of had our own fictional comic book company. And made our own books, just like, drawing them on paper and stapling them together. For my half of the company, my go-to character was a trash guy, who was the guy whose costume was like made out of garbage. Well, his sidekick was Kid Garbage. So yeah, that was the height. That was the height of my me being a cartoonist, me being a writer and artist.
Yeah, I made him as a kid, and my mother was my first customer. Only years later did I realize that she didn't really believe me that I invented Dr. Doom. I did a lot of Dr. Doom comics, loved Doom, and I did my first character I invented, kind of a Fantastic Four ripoff. His name was Atmosphere. He was an astronaut, went to the atmosphere. The meteor hit his ship. Ship had a big hole in it, and the atmosphere made him into a superhero.
So learning two things today is moms, support your children's art so they can grow up to be amazing writers. And two, your first try isn't your last try. You're growing and developing.
Cosmic asses.
Speaking of first tries, I'm going to list, I wrote down, you guys have so much work. So Jason has worked on Thor, God of Thunder, and Goddess, Avengers Original Sin, 3 volumes of Star Wars, including Vader Down, which is amazing if you guys haven't checked it out, Scalps, which is bonkers, Southern Bastards, Avengers vs. X-Men, Wolverine Goes to Hell, Weapon X, and Death of Wolverine, The Goddamn Punisher Max, Amazing X-Men, and The Other Side. Christian Gossett invented the he invented the double-bladed lightsaber. It's true, it happened and it's amazing. And Tales of the Jedi. He's worked on the first Spider-Man video game for the PlayStation, which was also produced with the guys who did Tony Hawk. It was also bonkers and amazing. Call of Duty, Black Ops 3, Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland, Peter Jackson's King Kong, and of course his own work, The Red Star, which is currently being developed for television. Tell us a little bit about your first professional works and what that was like, especially considering I know a lot of people who attend cons are either getting started writing their own comic books or are interested in getting involved in this medium. What was it like, that first big piece that you do?
All right, I was 19 years old. I was working as a busboy in a burger joint, and the kid whose parents owned the thing loved comic books, and I was going to theater school at the time. And just earning my way, slinging burgers, as you do in Los Angeles when you're trying to get into the business. And I was at lunch and I was drawing the Punisher. Mike Zeck had just come out with this amazing Punisher series, and I was like, that is so cool. And my friend was a comic giant geek, said, are you out of your mind working for my parents? You should be doing comic books. Drove me to a comic book store. It was the late 80s, so there was an ad on the display case at the comic book store saying, comic book artists wanted. And I said, yeah, this can't be too bad. And so I took my pages from the Marvel tryout book that I had, because I did like comics, obviously. I was drawing stuff. And instead of doing the story that you're supposed to do, this Peter Parker versus Doc Ock story, I did some Punisher pages, submitted it to this company, and got the job. And that was my first job, and it all went from there.
That's amazing.
I wanted to write comics since I was a kid. I grew up in a small town in the South in Alabama. There's nobody from my neck of the woods who worked in comics. I'd never been to like a creator signing, anything like that. I had no idea how to go about breaking into comics. Back then you kind of had to live in New York. You kind of had to be where publishing was. These days it doesn't matter. I work with people who live all over the world. So it took me until I was almost 30 before I was able to get my foot in the door. I was always writing, working crappy day jobs. And then Marvel in 2001, they did a talent search contest for writers and artists, which is something they had never really done before. They did that Marvel tryout book, which I think that was Mark Bagley, right, who won that. But this was something different. They were going to find a couple of writers, a couple of artists. It would be at Wizard World Chicago and at San Diego. So for my part, like the Wolverine part of it, you typed up a one-page synopsis of a Wolverine story, and I did that and dropped it in a box like on top of a pile of other ones, and then kind of promptly forgot about it. And it was months later, I was at work and I had a voicemail on my phone from Mike Martz, who was the X-Men editor at Marvel. He's just like, hey, give me a call. And literally my first thought was like, oh man, that's really mean for him to call me just to tell me I didn't win. Like, why would he do that? And it turned out I did win. So I did this, 10-page Wolverine story. It was like the first comic script I'd ever written, my first published credit, which was, came out in 2002. So then it was like 5 years later before I had another book. So that was 5 years of me pitching for everything, pitching Punisher, pitching Captain America. And then in the midst of that, Marvel said they were going to relaunch the Epic line, and they wanted kind of weird takes on old properties. So I pitched a relaunch of the Nam, the Vietnam War book from the 80s. And to pitch it, you had to write the first script. I turned that in. So I wrote that, worked harder than I've ever worked on any script since, I think, that I worked on that one. I probably worked on it for months. It was very research, reference heavy. Turned it in, they said no. But I had that script, so I kind of started to shop it around and send it to kind of every publisher who I thought would be interested in the war book. And one of the people I emailed it to was Bill Dennis at Vertigo, who had done all the Garth Ennis war books. Garth was like the only guy doing war books at the time. And Will turned me down like 2 or 3 times. Because it's like, nobody's ever heard of you, nobody buys war books, why would we do this? And I was just like, well, I wrote the thing, like here, if you could take a look at it, let me know what you think of it. He's like, okay, I still can't use it, but sure, I'll take a look at it. And then he read it, and it was, took him a few months to read it. Over the course of those months, I was politely persistent and just like not bothering him, not getting on his nerves, but emailing, once in a while, just like, hey, still alive over here, just reminding you. And eventually he read it, and he's like, yeah, we want to do this. And that was the first like full comic script I wrote, and that led to Scout, and Scout kind of brought me back to Marvel.
So, okay, we're here to talk about adaptation. When you are building comic books with these characters who some have been around for 75, nearly 100 years, is there, what responsibility do you feel you owe both to the character itself and to the readers? As far as because you're adding to their canon and to their legacy, and I think that for a lot of fans, it's a huge deal. Every time a new book comes out, it's nitpicking over, what's changed and what's evolved.
Yeah, I mean, to me, my job, especially with the Marvel stuff, is to honor the legacy of the characters and the creators who worked on them. I get to stand on the shoulder of giants when I'm working on these characters. But that's also not about, you don't want to just pick the bones of the great stories from the past, right? To me, you honor the legacy of somebody like Jack Kirby by doing imaginative new stories, by taking these characters somewhere we haven't seen them before. So that might mean sometimes you gotta break continuity because it's impossible to reconcile every Spider-Man story written, right, over the course of decades. Any of these characters, you go read their Wikipedia page and you read the whole thing and it makes your brain hurt, right? This can't all fit together and make perfect sense. So to me, it's not just about continuity, it's about consistency, right? And you want to boil those characters down to what makes them cool, what makes them exciting and different, and then tell a story that we haven't seen before, and maybe you bend those characters quite a bit, and break them somewhat, not completely, but you want to kind of put things back in order when you pass it on to the next person, who will then come on and maybe tear down everything I did, which I'm totally cool with. I would want the next person with Thor to throw out what I did and do something cool and exciting we haven't seen before.
Yeah, it's really about what are the takeaways, right? What's really cool about a piece that you could bring forward? When I was asked to do Star Wars comics back at Dark Horse, I was really excited. I thought I was going to be working with Luke and Han and Leia, but no, they said, no, you're going to be doing stories 4,000 years before Luke Skywalker. And I was like, wow, that's cool. There must be all this great reference art for me to work from that was done by Ralph McQuarrie and Joe Johnston and all those guys. And they were like, no, there's nothing. It's all you. That was really exciting for a kid in his 20s. I get to invent a bunch of Star Wars stuff, and so that was a really wonderful, wide open, rare opportunity. And the big takeaways are, I kind of went to the source of the source. And I'd recommend that for anybody who is gonna, if you have a character you love, whoever it is, and you want to kind of put a stamp on it or write your version of it, fan fiction or whatever, if you're pitching too. Think about really what Jason says, what is it that makes them so amazing? Why have they lasted so long? What is it about that character? Why do you love that character so much? You gotta get kind of under the hood on them, and that'll help you get the answers you need.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it's important to answer those questions in the book. You can't just assume everybody knows these characters and loves them. Of course, a lot of the people reading Thor know Thor's history or invested in Thor, have been reading Thor, but every issue is somebody's first issue, so I think you always want to show, this is why I think Thor is cool, this is what I think is cool about Thor, this is why you should care, and that should be in the story, not just assume everybody already has that when they show up,
So, Jason, you said earlier, and I found it really interesting, that you I want to break the characters, but not too much. But I read Sculptor. You broke many of those characters.
Well, those were my characters. Those are the ones I made up. Those are the ones sometimes people get the maddest at you for, with even at Marvel, characters I create and then you do horrible things to, and people get mad. And I'm like, why make the character up? I feel some kind of right to put them through really, really horrible stuff. That's where the drama comes from.
It does. Just in writing Scout, I was curious about your research process, and especially, writing about Rez's life. It seems so specific. I've watched a lot of films of Indigenous people about res life, and it seems to me very much an outsider that you nailed it. And I was wondering, like, what was your research process for like that and bringing that to life? And then maybe if you could talk a little bit about the feedback you've gotten from Indigenous people who've read the book.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, my first two books at Vertigo were The Other Side, which is a Vietnam War book, and then Scalped, which is a modern-day crime story on a reservation in South Dakota. So both were very research-heavy. But you know, I'm not a Vietnam War veteran. Never lived on a reservation. So two things that were not personal experiences for me. They were both things subjects I'd been interested in for a long time. It wasn't something I started researching from like when I had the idea for a book. The book kind of grew out of things I'd already done a lot of reading on. With Scouts in particular, it was a lot of reading. It was some talking to people who I know who do live in not exactly the same. I mean, Scout was set on a fictional reservation, but it was pretty much like the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. So not people who live in that exact same circumstances, but it was you know, some reading, some talking to people, and then you know, it's a crime story, so it's a very it's a heightened reality. It's not meant to be an exact replication, or it's not meant to be a drama or a documentary. But yeah, in terms of the response, has been, you know, for the most part, really great. Like Native people have really responded to the book. One, it's great that it's, you know, for so many years we've seen stories about Indigenous people that have like a white guy in the lead. And this is a story where it's a Native story, and the cast is predominantly, the main cast is, you know, all Native. And that's the cool thing about the pilot that they shot. The cast was, for Scout, the cast was really amazing, all Native. So I think Native people really responded to that. And yeah, the response to the book was really great. And you know, that's, even though I won this Marvel Talent Search contest, which is kind of what got my foot in the door, Scout was really what gave me a comic book career.
Can you explain what happened with the pilot?
Yeah, with there was a pilot shot for Scout, which, you know, by DC. Scout is a Vertigo book, so it's pretty much DC who controls all that. It was set up at WGN, who were kind of already getting out of the original programming business while it was being shot, so nothing happened with it, didn't get picked up. I don't know if you'll ever get to see it. I mean, I got to go hang out on the set, which was pretty wild. When I was there, they were shooting in what was the Crazy Horse Casino, which was the casino from the book. So at one point, we went to lunch. I'm sitting there eating my chicken, and I look up, and it's like Red Crow and Dash are sitting in like a wardrobe eating chicken together, and I'm like, this is weird. Because, you know, Dash, the character of Dash is named after my son. Like, my son is named Dash. His last name is Bad Horse, and that's my cousin's last name. So it's weird to look up and see, like, I made these people up in my head, and like now they're sitting in front of me eating together. So the cast was really amazing. The pilot was cool. Sucks that nothing happened with it. I felt bad mostly for them. But to me, that's like another thing. Like, I kind of went into it. The odds were long that we would ever get to do the book to begin with, because I was brand new. Gira, the artist, had done a bunch of stuff in Europe, but had never done anything here. So the fact we got to tell that story over the course of 60 issues was pretty amazing, and we got to tell exactly the story we wanted to tell. If anything ever happens with it beyond that, that's kind of gravy. You know, to me, the book was like the be-all, end-all.
It does stand on its own. Hopefully, perhaps the cable network or internet gods out there will see us through and get it on a screen in front of us soon. Christian, I wanted to ask you, I assume same as Jason, no war experience?
That's right. I do come from a military family, but they all said to me, you don't need the list. Go ahead, let's skip a generation.
Right on. So as you're working on Black Ops 3, what is your research process like? And then also, I assume you're working in a team or with multiple writers?
Yeah, when you're designing for one of those games, they called me in because it was a futuristic game, and I had been developing a story on my own that was all about plausible futuristic warfare. What is warfare really going to be like in the next big show? What is it? It's not going to be fire and maneuver. They were trying to, fire and maneuver, for those of you who don't know, is basically the basic way of describing the way combat was happening in World War II. You set up a base of fire, a lot of machine guns throwing lead, and then you maneuver around the enemy. And that has worked well for a long time, but with obviously time goes on. And so now there's all kinds of new modes of combat. How are human beings going to wage war? And like I said, I'm from a military family, and some of them are pretty darn obsessed with lots of military books, lots of like, oh, you know, if Custer had done this, or if Patton had done that, or that kind of stuff. So it's really fun for me. It is fascinating how the world changes by these conflicts. And so they brought me in and said, what is it going to be? What do you think it's going to be? What can we do that will still make the players feel like they're getting a Call of Duty experience, but at the same time will be a legit kind of forecast into what new combat might be like, given the drones and given the technology and all that stuff. That's what it was a blast. We had a great time kind of speculating and being a brain trust.
So as you're working on a video game, like I'm envisioning scenes. I know you have cut scenes, which I imagine is pretty standard, like television or script writing. But then you have all of these like random words, or sentences or commands throughout the game. Are you involved in writing that, or are you strictly like story driven?
Yeah, you definitely. You never know. You kind of throw a bunch of stuff into the process, and you never know what's going to make the final gaming script. Kind of thing. And then the actors, of course, voice actors these days, they're coming off of 3 other games where they had to say the same lock and load, you know. So they're all kind of well versed. Oh, no, this last game we did this thing. Can I say that? Oh yeah, sure, say it.
Great. I want to open to the audience now. Do you guys have any questions for these guys? Don't be shy. They're super nice.
I have a question. Where'd you get those shoes?
These are my
Those
fun.
are wild.
Aren't these wild? I got these at a Nike outlet in Camarillo on a dare. They're very bubbly. I figured I'm going to a comic convention. I can wear these shoes.
They look like they came from the future.
Right? These are from the future. I have a time machine. Rick and Morty.
It's cute. Okay, I'll keep going. Do you guys have a favorite?
You guys have a question.
Sorry, guys. Yeah. The question for those of you who could not hear was, at any time you looked at comics and gone, this is not for me, and then worked through it to come back to comics?
You mean like just as a fan, as a reader?
Well, as a professional, any time you're like, you know, it's not working out, I'm going too far, I want to go. And you don't just say it. You don't want to give it up.
No. I mean, it was, again, I got my foot in the door when this talent search contest, and it took me another 5 years of working with nothing to show for it. So yeah, that would get frustrating at times. And you know, I was having to work a day job that would pay the bills, and then try to pursue comics at night. So it's kind of like working 2 jobs. I mean, to me, if you want comics or a creative field to be your career, to be your job, you have to treat it like a job, even when it's not paying you like a job. Even in my case, where it's paid me nothing. So that's hard. You're working 2 jobs and you're getting paid for one of them. But no, that was literally all I ever wanted to do. It's what I wanted to do since I was a kid. I don't really know how to do anything else. I don't have any marketable skills, you know? So I had no backup plan. It was sort of all or nothing. And yeah, that would get frustrated at times, but I was so passionate and so in deep of like, I kind of got to do this in some capacity. And I felt that way for years, and I always felt the hard part is being good enough, right? I thought breaking in, everybody wants to know how do you break in, or how do you get your novel published, or how do you get your screenplay seen. I always thought, if I just get good enough, if I worry about being good enough, I think that's hard, right? If I can do that, I can figure out the other part. So that's what I focused on for years. It was just, I want to be good enough, and I can figure out how to get somebody's attention someday. And yeah, it took me years to do that, but once I got to the point where I feel like, all right, I think I'm maybe good enough to actually warrant somebody's attention, that's the part that I was focused on.
You know, that's the thing that happens a lot. Is that the story is, for a lot of people who don't get published, they're fighting the war in their head. Am I good enough? Am I good enough? Am I good enough? And they just go on in their own mind, and maybe they got some stuff written, but they don't approach it in a way that they're showing anybody. They could be Stephen King, but if they don't show anybody, no one will ever know. In fact, Stephen King, how many of you know the story about Stephen King and Carrie, where he took the manuscript for Carrie and threw it in the trash? He was so frustrated, and he was so bummed out about how it was coming. He didn't feel like it was any good, put it in the trash. Thankfully, his wife realized he was just having a moment, took it out of the trash and said, honey, you're gonna finish this, we're gonna send it out to publishers. And thank goodness, because, right, we would have never heard of it. And so really, that battle that you're fighting in your head, fight it with publishers. Have them tell you if you're good enough. Just like Jason was saying, you pitch, and you pitch, and you pitch, and you don't get it every time, but don't fight that battle in your mind. Fight that battle with people who can tell you whether or not you are good, and who might be able to pay you.
Ask multiple people. Yes.
Is it hard to kill off characters? No, it's really easy. I do it all the time. Hard in what sense? Hard in terms of the... Sure, well, I mean, like killing off characters that, you know, been around a long time, yeah, you don't want to do that willy-nilly, right? But sometimes, you know, I mean, it's all about what story you're telling, right? And does this character need to die to tell the story? Sometimes the answer is yes. No, I did not kill Wolverine. I brought him back to life. I've killed lots of other people, but not Wolverine. Comic characters, I mean, not real people. I'm not confessing anything.
That's remarkable skill. You're an assassin.
Can't talk about that.
Other questions? Okay, is there a character or franchise that you guys have not had the opportunity to work on that you would like to work on? I have suggestions.
Well, I'd like to yeah.
Suggestions. Okay, Jason, I would love it if you did Batman anything. I feel like gritty crime dramas are your wheelhouse, and that would be really dope to see you do Batman. Preferably in Bloodhaven, where he's not welcome, and it's very weird and different. I haven't thought about this at all.
That sounds like your Batman pitch. I think you should do that.
I am working on things. And then Christian, I think we really need a good Green Lantern. Like, it's time. It's time to have a good Green Lantern on screen. And I feel like, for me, Green Lantern is not Captain America. He's much grittier. And I wouldn't mind seeing a Jon Stewart, you know, take the helm and militarized kind of Green Lantern storyline. I asked and answered my own question. I'm sorry, guys. That was awful.
That's good answers.
Yeah, I'm a huge nerd. I've been reading comics forever. My basement is filled with long boxes. So yes, I have a list of sort of my favorite characters. You know, I got a lot of Batman. It'd be cool to write Batman someday. I wrote, the only DCU thing I ever did was a Penguin one-shot where Batman showed up for one panel. So I wrote Batman for one panel. So yeah, my list is kind of weird. Like, I love Godzilla. I would love to write Uncle Scrooge someday.
Yes, the Dark Knight guys are here.
Sure.
Let's make it work.
I feel like part of me feels like you're not a real comic book writer until you've written Superman, so I'd love to do that. But I also, I mean, for me, like as a writer, I've never chased characters. I kind of figured out pretty quickly. I just sort of rolled with the punches of what was available and who did I want to work with. To me, it was more important, like what editor I wanted to work with than really what characters they were doing. Like, I never came in and just like, I just want to write Spider-Man. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It's Spider-Man or nothing. I've kind of never done that. I mean, Thor was not a character. I was walking around with a briefcase full of Thor ideas. It was kind of the right time and the right moment, and I was like, I think I want to write Thor. And that's, you know, worked out. So I never really chased that, will I write Batman someday? You know, I'd like to, but who knows when that'll be. It's kind of when the time is right.
Dr. Doom I would love to do a Dr. Doom-centric story.
Yes.
That's what I'd like to do, where it's all about him and his POV. Has that been done? Has that been done? Big deal?
Kind of. There's a really good Doctor Doom, Doctor Strange mashup
Nice.
where they like go under and Doctor Doom recruits Doctor Strange to help him solve a problem for his country, but end up crossing them. It's super good.
That's awesome.
There was a good Burn had a couple of really good. He was on FF, like some good Doom-centric stories, right? And then there was that one miniseries one time where Doom like went into space and took over this whole planet.
Awesome. Yeah, I like Doom. Galactus too. I like the bad guys. I like bad-centric stories.
Okay,
Galactus.
villains. I get down with it. I get down. So as you guys are creating these new narratives, sometimes the fans are not happy about it. I know Jason, when Jane took the mantle, people were very upset. And you know, people have had different thoughts here and there about either Black Ops or Spider-Man. How do you guys deal with that? Or do you? Do you even bother to look at the comments? Or are you like, you know, I wrote it and it's out there now?
Yeah, you know, I see stuff that filters down to me. Yeah, the Jane stuff, you know, had a huge response, so I still got people yelling at me about that.
It's over now.
Which, you know, I mean, I kind of take it all with a grain of salt. I can go on Twitter every day and there are people telling me, oh, that's great, and people telling me, you're the worst writer in comics. That's sort of the way it is. Like, if somebody's not telling you you're terrible, you're probably doing something wrong. Because the bigger the project, the bigger the response. But what I never want to get to, and what I haven't done yet, is let that affect what I do. Because I mean, my job to me feels very selfish. I don't only know how to write the comics that I want to read. I don't know how to write books you want to read or anybody else. I just know what I like. So when I sit down to work, it's just me alone in my office. I'm not looking at Twitter, I'm not looking at anything else. I'm just like, what do I want to see? And then I write that and I send it off. That's all I know how to do. You know, hopefully if I respond to something, other people will as well. And you know, that's why I have a career. But I'm never gonna change the story I'm telling based on what somebody on Twitter yells at me. If I do, I should quit, you know, and find another job.
Yeah, that's the case. Just don't let it affect your writing. Just take it.
So just don't even bother reading this stuff.
Sometimes I think they're funny.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, you can get some interesting stuff in there. If you can take it and don't take it personally, then you can actually kind of maybe sometimes extract something useful from it even. Like, oh, that's a good idea. Like, don't get mad about it. Don't be hurt. People are just lashing out. But I mind everything. If it's something that's possibly useful, then that's you know, that's a way to look at it.
I know the Rick and Morty guys live inside of Reddit, and they're like, because sometimes people get really close to the direction they were going to go, and they're like, oh, we got to scrap it and start again. We don't want the fans to guess. We're trying to stay 2 steps ahead. So I think it's really interesting, the connection that we have now to these creators. You know, cons obviously provide an opportunity for you guys to interact directly with your fans, but also the internet has kind of opened this like large floodgate of communication and excitement and fandom. I was wondering, how do you guys, I want to ask you how you deal with the fans. So you all started by going directly to the companies and like giving your stuff, but do you think now as fans are out here creating their own, that's like a viable option?